Guys, intro time.
Wait, which intro?
The wisdom check.
Oh, good.
Wait, no. I thought we were keeping the old intro. What's wrong with the old one? People like that one.
It was too long.
Yeah.
Too many fucking gifs.
Yeah.
Yeah. But can we keep the part where I yell more?
No.
But it's the intro to end all intros.
I got like what? 2 lines last time?
Do you want more lines, Tim?
Well, no, not really.
In a world without answers.
Yeah.
Wait, you want to start with that?
Here we go. Exactly like last time.
Wait, okay, so we're doing the exact same way? Let's start with Smoky Bar.
No. It's a new season. We have to have a new intro.
More.
Not sure why we thought this would go any differently.
Oh, well. Welcome, everyone, to the Wisdom Check, where Jeff and Dustin welcome a guest every week to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Welcome.
This is ridiculous. I'm starting the stream now.
Wait, where's my die at? Well, we can't start until I botch, and it's not an intro unless I'm botching.
You're on.
Hey, welcome everyone. It's the Wisdom Check. You're here once again with me, Jeff, and Dustin's over there with us from a hotel tonight. So
That's right. Come to you live from Noblesville, Indiana, from the Cambria Hotel. Where I'm here for actual work, the people that pay me to do some analyzer training for the week. So I'm here on behalf of Roche. So hanging out here at the moment. We're gonna make this thing happen because I don't take a week off hardly ever, even if I'm somewhere else. So
that's a fact. And yes, Air Laser, he is a bit on the quiet side. There is a hotel there, so he's trying not to wake people up. So I've got him cranked up as much as I can. But I
can talk a little bit louder, but I'm just trying not to yell too much. If I get excited, my voice will raise, and that just happens sometimes. But
Mouse, Dustin doesn't have access to the chat right now, so I'll have to read it out to him. But Mouse says, "Dude, Dustin, did you get in a fight?" I don't know. He's
the angle of the camera slightly.
He's in a secret, identity protection here for now. But anyway, tonight we were looking to do a little bit of talking about a couple different topics I think kind of linked together. And we were doing a little bit of talk before here. And the two topics we're kind of looking at involve itemization, and we're also looking at like challenge ratings and like encounter design. And both of those I think have something in common that we're going to kind of dig into here. But there seems to be a change in flavor, I think is what we've kind of identified in our pre-chat here. So we're going to kind of dig into that and see what people are thinking about itemization in their games as both a player and as a DM. This is kind of coming up for me because I've been doing some preparation for Pathfinder games and looking at how they're kind of redoing their stuff, kind of looking at how I want to organize stuff going forward for you guys in your encounters. And in particular, looking at it based on the early fights that we had where I was intentionally dialing it up to excessively hard on purpose and seeing what kind of encounter that felt like to a player. So it's interesting the kind of give and take between system and just winging it. So I don't know. I know with Zweihander they're doing something completely different. I don't know that they have a system for that.
It's a whole different type of itemization. I'll get onto that in a little bit. We'll just start with the D&D Pathfinder because that's the one people understand the most. And then when I talk about like Zweihander later, you'll see the contrast in how itemization works in Zweihander versus something like D&D Pathfinder. Now, when we talk a lot about Pathfinder, we have a very long history with Pathfinder First Edition. And I think we both agree that Pathfinder First Edition, that gear was far more vital to the system than it probably is in 5e and maybe even Pathfinder 2. So far, I don't feel like gear is that essential in Pathfinder 2.
Right. Yeah, I
But
think
that
it was.
could just be the level we played at. We've only played at like level 3, so it's hard to say at level 3 how essential gear is to your character. But
Mhm.
I don't feel the mechanical need for the gear the same way I did in Pathfinder 1.
hmm Yeah, I think what we've, well, at least what I've seen is there are actually little sidebars and stuff in Pathfinder 2e talking about how you don't need items to keep up with the math. Like specifically says that outright. That is not a design feature of this system. So I think they heard the complaint loud and clear from the previous one. Because I think it is true, 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons, 4th Ed, and Pathfinder all had this thing where they baked in the numbers from the magic items and said, you're supposed to have X number at this level. You're supposed to have an AC about this point. At level 12, you should be here. Your saving throws should be about like this. And so like all their monsters were built around that assumption that you were handing them out at a certain level. And it looks like, at least from my experience with it, I think Pathfinder 2e from the book and then the 5e Dungeons and Dragons crowd seems to be doing it differently. So like with 5e, I know they specifically said we flatten the math and our math assumes nothing about magic items. So like that one is like a given, and that seems to be the way that Pathfinder 2e is going, but I don't know for sure yet.
It is early. Like I said, it's hard for us, I think, to tell at this point. But what they've done is they've taken magic items and they've made it the sprinkles on the cupcake. It's not the cake. It ain't even the icing anymore. It's the cool sprinkles on top. And that's, in a way, that's okay with me.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that because what it does then is it takes your magic items and it lets them you can be creative with them. You can homebrew them. You can just go pick the ones that sound fun and put them in the game and not feel like you're hindering someone's ability to perform on the battle map, or that their character won't get to do things they wanted to be able to do by not thinking about that as a GM when you're putting those things, when you're coming up with what is going to be in a treasure hoard,
right?
Something of that sort.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about this a little bit before. You're saying like the sprinkles on the cake kind of idea here. I don't know, like in recent editions, I felt like magic items didn't feel special. They just felt like math fixes to things.
Yeah,
and
like I compared it to Diablo. It was Diablo magic items. It was the green. This is the sword of the wolf +5 to health, and you're like, oh, okay, well that's better than nothing. It's best. It's the best in slot that I have, so I'll walk around with it for a while until I get a sort of thundering +5. So they were very mundane in that fashion.
Yeah, Malice is saying that he thought 4th edition was very loot centric because it was designed around an MMO. So he was saying it's very WoW-like, requiring gear ups. I mean, I think they were pretty transparent with their system in 4E, and so as a result, it was very apparent that their gear requirements were there.
But we didn't play 4E long enough for me to get that sense from it in that kind of way. I'm talking about Pathfinder, and I'm talking about 3rd edition.
Yeah, those are the two big ones for me.
Those are the two that we're talking about, because like when you just look at the number of slots on a character that you can itemize out in Pathfinder 1st edition, it's more than most video game MMOs I play, slots that I have for my MMO character. And MMOs are all about the gear. Like that's literally what you're doing in an MMO usually, is gearing yourself out. You're doing raids to get cool gear. So to me, a tabletop role-playing game, if you're basing your thing around story and character, should not have more item slots than my MMO character. That blows my mind when I look at it.
Yeah, Malice, I also enjoyed 4E, so you're one of 3 people. I must be one of those 3 as well. I think this funny thing there, though, is that like if you look at 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons, or 1st even, there was no such thing as a slot, right? It was just you have it or you don't have it, right? So in theory,
there was restrictions on 2nd Ed.
Yeah, but they weren't like hard distinctions like they were made in 3rd edition. I think 3rd edition came out and said like, oh, we want to specifically say these items are incompatible. Like you can only have X number. There
were rules in that 2nd Ed. It was like you could only have so many rings because you couldn't wear 10 rings. You could only have like 2 magic rings, 1 on each hand. You only have 1 necklace. Like those things were defined. They just weren't as heavy-handed, because what you didn't have is you didn't have like helmet slot and headband slot as separate. You
Right.
had a head
Yeah.
slot that could have a headband or a helmet. Like, so they were there. It was just more things were categorized differently. You're right. They expanded it definitely in third ed and with Pathfinder. It expanded to where it was like now you have gloves and wrist slots that are different. Like,
Right.
you know, like I said, you're getting to the MMO level of minutia of the difference between my bracer and my glove. So
Sure.
it's-
Yeah. Yeah. I think.
and that's what they did.
Yeah, and I don't know that that's super problematic necessarily. It's just interesting. It's like I don't know that's the numbers that are terribly important. Like I know in Pathfinder there's a limitation to how many items you can attune to in total. Doesn't really bother with slots. It just says if it requires attunement, you can attune to X number. Period.
Right.
Or like in fifth ed, they have something along the same vein as well.
Yeah, I think it's only slots only matter
Mhm.
if it depends on how they distribute what sort of stats go into the slots.
Mhm.
Like, because at the end of the day, it's a math problem, and
Right.
this is where the math causes a problem on the back end when you're creating your CRs. If you can do armor class, for instance, and you can get a +1 warding armor class in every single slot, and you want to
Mhm.
power game that out, you can be +1 in everything. And if there's 14 item slots, you can add 14 to your AC
Right.
on
Yeah.
top of whatever the AC is. Well, now you can't be hit by most creatures of your challenge rating.
Hmm.
So it's fine if you're randomizing what loot drops, because you're going to get a spackle of different stats here and there, so nothing gets too far out of whack. But when you start letting players sell all that gear and start purchasing the items that they want to power game into it, now they're going to break the math of the game, and your challenge ratings are not going to match up or work. And then you're in a whole nother level of what do you do?
Sure. Yeah, and that's something we were talking about getting into as well, was with the challenge ratings. So I think this is a thing that's always been there with games, trying to figure out, how to equip a DM with tools to balance an encounter out. And the notion of balance, I guess, is where things are coming to a head, right? So, like, you're the issue you're describing there with stacking, which is also what Mouse is saying, is that it gets you out of the expectations of balance with something. So if there is some expectation that your armor class should be within a certain range, suddenly this character is able to get out of that. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing, because when I was looking back to like old games we used to play, I always felt like the magic items were like outside of the system. They were just like something extra. They were just like weird, amazing magic, story, flavor, whatever capabilities you couldn't get any other way. And now it feels like they're kind of sewn into everything. It's like more of the same thing that you could already do. And so like the system seems to incorporate it that way.
Sometimes it does. I think that I feel like in second edition, from my memory, we handed out top-end magic items like they were regular parts of the story.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if we always rolled correctly or used the charts correctly, but we rolled what we got a lot of times, but I don't think how we got onto those charts was correct. I'll just put that out there. But, so like,
if we rolled on them at all.
I remember my paladin. I rolled for my flame tongue. Like I remember when I got the flame tongue with my paladin. It had like crazy, like weird combination stuff. It was like a +1 flaming weapon against most creatures. But if it was avian, it got a +3. If it was undead, it got a +4. So like it had all these weird variations on what it would do. So it gave you the math for hitting and damage as a possibility. The difference is like if you crit and you doubled all that, you were still in the realm of like you did a chunk of damage to this dragon.
Right.
No big deal. Now it's like if you tweak things out right, like you can slay these things in a round at pretty low level. Like just because of the way that everything can stack up onto it. Like, and I don't know why, because I don't feel like the damages are that much higher on characters, but I feel like the crit mechanics are different, and I feel like some of the way that stuff gets treated now is a little different. Like the number of sources coming in is is more than it used to be. So then you end up with higher numbers.
Hey, we just got rated by Dragons in the Dining Room with 9 people. Welcome.
Hey, Ian
so
Tycho, thank you for stopping by.
yeah, absolutely. Jade Arsenic, hello, Dragon Raid. So we're talking tonight about encounter design, challenge ratings, itemization, and kind of the balance of those things. So we got War Dog 3901, we got Karma Rum, we got Dragons in the Dining Room. Welcome, everybody. So yeah, that's what we're kind of talking about right now. We're talking about just kind of the way games have felt different over the years with how they handled this stuff, and we're trying to figure out if it's a basis of us as players and DMs having spent time behind the DM screen, and therefore knowing how everything's put together and seeing the system, everywhere we look, or if there is a distinction, like in the way that it feels now relative to the way it used to. And I'm kind of leaning towards the idea that it's just because we've spent so much time behind the DM screen that the stuff doesn't feel special in the same way that it did when we were kids, getting our loot pinata as in second ed, and getting some weird, wacky new ability that was neat. Like it always felt like we were stumbling onto artifacts all the time, whereas now the items feel like slightly better versions of common stuff.
Well, I think what happens is the first time that you do anything, it's fun and different.
Mm-hmm.
So like we were getting a lot of those named items out of the way pretty early in our gaming careers.
Right? Yeah.
First paladin got like 2 different holy avengers in his lifetime. Like my first fighter got the gauntlets of ogre power and a belt of giant strength. Like, back when that's all you needed for the set, you didn't have to have the hammer of thunderbolts at that point in time. Like, so like we had people who had a hammer of thunderbolts. Like those things were all things that were handed out throughout gameplay, so they were unique and they were special. And those characters became heavily defined by the fact that they were the people who had those items. Mm-hmm. Like I said, it's almost like I keep kind of going back to it's almost like the MMO type of mentality, right? You get to be known if you're the dude with the blessed blade of the wind seeker or whatever it was. Like you were that dude walking around in WoW, everyone knew who you were in vanilla. Like you were
I guess so. Yeah.
Thunder Fury, So in the same way, like Zen was paladin who had Holy Avenger. He
mm-hmm.
had, there's still character to him, but like that was a large part of like what he was looking for.
It was back when we weren't really doing a lot of character stuff. And DM Thinko, I kind of agree. Yeah, that's exactly it. When you see behind the curtain, the WoW slowly fades away a bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But go ahead and keep going.
But no, so what I was just saying is so like by the time we got around to playing third ed, like unless you wanted to see how they changed an item from the previous edition, you're like, hey,
mm-hmm.
I had a hammer of thunderbolts once. I want to play with a hammer of thunderbolts again to see how cool it is now that they made it an artifact. Like, maybe just for nostalgia's sake, you want another character who gets one.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're playing in the same technical homebrew world, you can have him go find the old character who had it and do some quest to earn it or something. You can make it fun and story related even. But at the end of the day, you've already had that item once on a character before, so it's not nearly as cool to do it a second time, unless it's a new edition and you just want to see how they tweak the item. Then maybe it's cool to see it once, and then you're kind of like over it again. So then you start looking at like, well, what's new? Well, a lot of these editions, I don't know why, but for a game that's based on so much creativity, I don't feel like a lot of new creative items really came out with newer editions. But there was a lot of lower tier, like they tried to make the lower rung more interesting. So they were like, here's like all the 500 different words that mean that it does a different element type, or it does, some other, it functions in some mechanical way, but it's not a named item. So
sure. Well, the named items, I think, have a lot to do with the game designers at the time, right? So like you have the characters that, the Gygax has played that had items named for them, like, so that became kind of iconic, and Dragon's Dining Room, he's a little quieter because he's on a cell phone and he's trying not to make too much noise there.
Yeah, just trying not to be like yelling too seriously loud, so hopefully everyone can hear me.
Yeah, I could try to up him a little bit more, but it's it's at that point where it'll start fuzzing out his voice if I get it louder. So, but yeah, I think some of it is that I guess when you're the original people making the game, you feel like you could just make stuff up, right? Because you're making everything else up. Why not? Whereas I think as years went on and people were adding into an existing game, I feel like people hesitate to create new things and publish new things, right? Like,
Sure. I mean, that could be. I don't know why, but I guess, if you always want to honor that the most biggest bad sword you could ever have is a Sword of Nine Lives stealing or a Vorpal sword, if that's really what you always want to be the biggest and baddest because it always has been, then so be it. But like, I don't feel like I need a weapon that's bigger and badder than that. I need a weapon that's more interesting than that. Like,
yeah.
a weapon that lops heads off is cool when I was 16. Now I want a weapon that does a little more than just lop someone's head off. Like, give me something that's more fun. Like, and that's where our DM does a pretty good job, like coming up with some interesting itemization. He doesn't give us a ton of magic, but the few that he does give us a lot of times does typically have a little more interest to it, especially if it's story related.
Now, see, that is something that's interesting about 5th Ed, is when I went through and looked at their book, trying to think of like Xanathar's Guide is what I'm thinking of here predominantly. The items that they had in this book are weird. They're not useful. They're just odd. Like they're fun in that they're quirky and weird, but you would have to try really hard to come up with a reasonable way of using the thing. And sometimes that's fun. I can get that.
Yeah, I have fun doing that sort of stuff sometimes.
Yeah, so but it kind of gets in this weird world of like, okay, if you're making magic items, and according to the rules in 5th Ed, it's taking you like years of dedicated 9 to 5 time, and you're deciding to make a scimitar of horse detection, come on now.
Yeah. Like, so, you have to come up with some weird story about where that was like super important.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were lost in the desert and you just needed to find some horses. Like, so you have to come up with some weird story about how that weapon came into existence. If you worry about that part at all. If you worry about it at all. Some people, it's literally just like I said, it's like Diablo. Monster drops the +5, health Sword of the Whale, and you're like, okay, what's the Sword of the Whale? Like it's no big deal how that dropped out of a wolf's mouth, but hey, cool, there it is, right? Like I don't know. Sometimes I think with magic items, people don't worry about the backstory of the item itself. They just assume it is what it is, and do they want to use it or do they want to sell it for its value and get something they really want? Right.
Well, and I think that's a tricky thing as a DM. DM Thicko and Mouse. I agree there. I think it is something to do with the era of TSR. When players were submitting things all the time, and then after that fact, people aren't really doing that. And then Mouse, I think you're right with the Star Wars reference there. Yeah, people don't like change. That's true. So, yeah, that's the thing. But anyway, what you're saying is the backstory and the history of items. And I think because the assumptions of some of these editions where magic items are math band-aids, there wasn't history behind these items. It was clear it was just some dude at a shop had made it, last week or something. That there wasn't anything special about it. It was just your garden variety +1 scimitar. Whereas back in the day, magic items presumably came from a long ago past empire or wizard of 2,000 years ago that used it in this war in this way, and this was going on, blah 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 blah. Right? So everything had the quality that the modern artifact items have. There was assumption
that's
of
a reflection
content.
Of the world. That's a reflection of the world, though, because if you're creating a low fantasy world, a Tolkien world, if you're you take Tolkien, there's like 3 magic items in the Lord of the Rings, maybe 4 if you think about them long enough. There's like 4 magic items. They all have a specific name. They all have a specific use,
Yeah.
and they all have a specific story behind them.
Mm-hmm.
No one else has magic. When you think of like 5e, everyone, I always joke, right? Everyone's a wizard. Everyone has magic or access to magic. Like, magic is just so infused into the world, there's no reason to believe that the local blacksmith doesn't just craft his own magic items without the help of a wizard or cleric. In second edition, it was like, wizards and clerics, those were your magic users. And if you had anything magical on you, some wizard or cleric out there is the person who made it.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like magic just lived in the world like I think it does. And that's a philosophical difference in just your world design of what you want your world to be. Going from a low fantasy Tolkien-like world to a highly infused magic world, a Harry Potter style world almost, where everything's magical.
Well, and I think Malice has got it figured out here. Because what you're hitting on and what Malice hit here is, I think the culmination is that D&D, he's saying D&D's greatest flaw is a desire to have a game full of magic items, but also a game where the players are not involved in the creation of magic items. So it's like, they're everywhere, but you're not the people dealing with it. You're just the consumer.
You're just the end user. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a weird disconnect. Like, I'm totally on board for a world that is like high magic, that it's everywhere. It's just like electricity is for us, and your blacksmith down the street knows how to make some low-level stuff. If that's the way it is, then okay, magic items are more mundane. They're just things. Right. But that's not the way the game seems to want to treat them. And yet that's what they are. And that's
because there's technically hierarchies of magic items. Not all magic items are created equal. You got your mundane. It's again, it goes back to my Diablo theory. You got your mundane green items that drop off of any old mob you kill. And then there's your rare items that got a lot of cool stats on it. If you played like Diablo 3, some of the rare items were better than the unique items for a long time in the game, stat-wise. So you can get some pretty good mid-range items. And then there's the super cool named ones that you're out collecting because they are super cool, have names, and they're super like cool backstory stuff, or tied to the lore. And so you're collecting them for those, and sometimes they're not even statistically better than the other item for you, technically, based on math.
Right.
But you want them because they're cool. And that's exactly what we did with like Diablo for years. I went out and killed a bunch of things to collect as many of those cool named items as we could get. And I feel like sometimes D&D does the same thing. Like, it recognizes the Holy Avenger and the Nine Lives Stealer as like named items that are supposed to be super rare. And so they give them that category of like super rare artifact, and they make sure they're really high and powerful. And then those are your story items, and then they totally understand there's a lot of +1 scimitars of horse detection out there in the world that just exist. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, I think Malice has got it figured out again here too. Is that some of that comes through with how their mechanics for creation are put in place. So, like, how long does it take to make a +1 dagger? Is it actually just kind of a nice weapon, or is it supposed to be a big deal? The rules make it a big deal in that it takes you a year to fucking make the damn thing. And more money than any peasant's ever going to see in their lifetime. But
it's a gold sink.
Yeah, it is. Because like the economy doesn't make any sense in D&D.
No, none. It makes zero sense. That's why when they take games like D&D and they put it in the video, and Mouse knows this because he plays MMOs with me, the economy for an MMO doesn't work if it's based on D&D style loot drops and gold. You end up with Diablo, where gold didn't matter. People created a whole new system of trading items in Diablo 2 with the SOJ ring, just simply because the gold was so numerous it didn't matter. Like, you couldn't trade anything for gold. And that's exactly what happens in D&D. Like, to the point that people just arbitrarily don't even use the gold system in most D&D games I'm in. They just don't care. Like, Balron's got a shit ton of gold. Nobody cared.
Well, and there's some things that go into that. It's so, like, with an economy, since this is kind of adjacent to what we're talking about, you know, it's your currency has value based on what it gets you, right? And what you can acquire has a value based on how important it is to your character or your person, right? So, like, since we as gamers don't really play the, go camping, deal with nature, buy food, figure out how nice your place is that you're staying in, and have any kind of mechanics to back up why those are important decisions, it doesn't matter to us whether we're sleeping on a cot or in the Taj Mahal, right? Like,
right.
And so there's no place to put that money that actually matters. And then when the only thing that matters is at level 1, your plate armor's out of control costly, so you can't get it, or your magic items are, in the thousands of gold, then gold doesn't matter until you can afford those things, and then it matters the one time you buy them. Yeah. So that's kind of weird.
And again, this is a D&D centric problem. Because D&D is a lot of high fantasy, it's a lot of globe trotting. You're not even staying in one place, so it's not like you need to buy land and a house, pay taxes. Like you're not living that mundane shopkeeper life of buying inventory to resell it later. Like you're figuring you're lugging the piece of art you drug out of a dragon hoard to the nearest town to hopefully find someone with enough coin to buy it from you, so that you don't have to lug that thing around another 10 miles to the next town. Like, you're not having to buy horses, carts, and food to haul the rest of your treasure with you, right? Like those are the kinds of things that some simulationist GMs or DMs will make you do in a D&D game, where you have to figure out how many henchmen you have to feed in order to protect all your loot while you go into the next dungeon. But most people aren't doing that.
Now, that is something of interest, though, because you and I are both running games that are central to a city, right? They're city-centric.
Yes.
And so I think that's going to have some effects on how we organize things. At least it is in my mind right now.
Yeah.
And there are certain things that I want to kind of stress and emphasize that do not seem to be reflected in the mechanics at all. And I'm not sure if they need to be, but I know that if they are referenced in the mechanics, I think players will care about them. Because once there's something there, you have to
reflect
right?
a lot of those things.
Yeah.
The system I'm using is Zweihander. It takes all of that into account. Because naps don't heal your stab wounds, you need expensive healthcare.
Sure.
Healthcare most characters cannot afford by the amount of gold you start with. So, like, just trying to do an adventure or a quest to get enough gold crowns to afford a healing potion damn near gets you to where you need 3 healing potions a lot of times. You are always on like I joke, that, and I'm, I love all the people at Zweihander, but I always joke it's made by Americans. You can tell nobody can afford healthcare in Zweihander. So, like there's a stress mechanic where if you don't buy the better room for the night, you may not wake up unharmed or imperiled. You'll wake up with a level of peril still on you instead of being completely cleared from it. So, like, there are mechanical bonuses to spending the extra coin. So having the extra coin matters. So there is some in Zweihander. You do see some of that, where having those resources and the economy, it actually works a little better as a low fantasy game. But all of it's based on the fact that equipment is so expensive, and you get next to nothing for a lot of what you do. So you can't hand out gold crowns very quickly, or a lot of that goes away.
Yeah. So just Josh is saying that his cleric and barbarian special ability is the only healing they have, and they tend to take cool items and weapons over money. So, he's still so rich he doesn't know what to do with the coin. Yeah. I've been thinking about playing around with that Malice. I me, I tinker around with game design stuff that I'll never implement in any way, shape, or form, but I have fun doing it. And some of what I was kind of toying around with was something like Zweihander's kind of stress mechanics. Like by default, when you go to bed, you're hoping to refresh yourself. And then, like, the level of quality of housing or food or drink or whatever has some impact on that. Like, if I was designing a game from scratch, I would have a very different way of kind of handling that. But I think there has to be some kind of resource or some kind of, lever, that is important to a player that those things impact. And they need to be important ones.
Now, Pathfinder does it differently, but in 5e, the easy hot fix, if you want to think of an easy hot fix, is take the hit dice that you can roll to get back, disassociate them from your character class, and associate them with a die based on your quality of life. So if you're running poor quality of life, you're healing D4s for each one of those dice. You can move up to D6s, D8s, D12s, up to D20s. If you're throwing the coin in to have a real luxurious spa day, you can heal D20s, right, for each one of them. Like, so there's, you could do something like that if you want to unhinge it from fighters always roll a 10, druids always roll an 8, like, for each one of those. So I mean, that's what you could do something like that if you want to incorporate that into 5e. Now Pathfinder's a little different,
Right.
it's more of a fixed rate.
Well, yeah. So your healing is coming up, but like what you could do is you can introduce bonuses, right? So like maybe you recover a little bit more, or you get a bonus, like you have floating +1 to something, or like your higher quality food gives you some bonus to like a saving throw or something throughout the day.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting with economy in your game, because I was thinking about this yesterday. Actually, I went out on a walk after I got here to Noblesville. I went out on a 3-4 mile walk, and I was thinking about it because I didn't realize this when I started creating Vagabond, but the Alchemist doesn't have spell slots like Old Alchemy did.
Nope.
I am only limited in my ability to create potions based on the amount of money I have on me. So for the first time in a long time, I have a character that his utility is directly based on his income. So that's going to be different because I get infused reagents every day that even if I have no money, I can always create a few. But I'm not limited to those. I can continue to just keep pumping out potions of whatever all day long if I have enough gold like dumped into me. I can just keep creating, and those don't go away like they used to. Like I literally just stockpile. I can stockpile forever with the new Alchemist. So economy is going to actually kind of be important for him in a way I didn't initially intend or think of, but after reading the rules.
Yeah, and it's kind of a nice little thing there. Like some of the stuff I'm looking to do with the game, and we'll see how it plays out, but and whether the players are open to it. But what I'm looking to do is set up a state more like a LARP, where you have stake in an area, you're trying to deal with who's around you, you have needs to, build up, to, set up shop somewhere, maybe hire some henchmen that can watch some things while you go do other things, that kind of stuff that we typically haven't done much of. And I think that that's going to include stuff like, paying off bribes and, dealing with taxes and, like stuff that normally wouldn't come up. That's going to incentivize players to actually need to go out and adventure outside of just, I want to go have fun. Like this is a lucrative way of doing things, to go out there and try to acquire.
This is where, in my opinion, that's a hard sell. So here's the problem I have with that model, just as a theory. And I know we're getting a little bit away from CR and our initial thought here, but as we're rolling along this idea, my problem with it is it's like if you want to have turf matter and you want to have like investments into like that area matter, what you can't do is then take the characters 2 games in and be like, well, here's the money you need to make all this happen. Let's go on an adventure. Because then you're leaving it behind. So the adventure the work has to take place inside that city also. Right.
No, that's what I'm saying is that there will be things like that.
So maybe adventure is not the word that you meant then.
What I mean by adventure is tasks that are bigger than a common person would be dealing with.
You got to pick up jobs.
Yeah, dealing with gangs that are nearby, dealing with the politics of the region, taking care of competitors, realizing you don't have enough capital to get what you need. So there's the legit way to do it, and then there's other ways to do it. Which way are you going? Yeah. That kind of stuff.
Right. No, so that makes sense, because that is the way that you have to do. You have to compete for those resources, and you have to make some of that happen in those sorts of means. And that gets into a very, I'm going to say, civilizations style game, where if you think of it in like a not a MOBA, but an RTS kind of style, where it's like, I want to build this thing up. I need these resources. Got to go beat down the neighbor, make sure I win the mine. Like come back and then build myself a stable so I can, start hiring some paladins, or something. Like you're working towards different style of goals, because now you're not improving yourself. You're improving other things that then have to function or you quit investing in them completely and go back to just arming up your hero in Warcraft 3, right? You just start arming up your hero, forget everything else, right? And let him go around and smite everything, which was a valid way to play. In fact, a lot of people won a lot of games that way. But, power level that guy up and don't worry about the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So,
there's a balancing act to be done.
Yeah, it's a different level of balancing you have to do if you're going to try to GM that style of game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be very different. As I have ideas for the overall story and how that's going to play in, but I want more investment in the world than just I'm a murder hobo that goes around town and waits to fight the monster that's going to be coming up. I want it to be more of like, I live in this world, these are the things I'm doing in this world, this is my stuff that I'm trying to accomplish, and there's this thing going on. How am I going to deal with it? Or am I going to deal with it?
And a certain amount of that just is maybe a session 0 talk with players and being like, here's what I want to do. Like, find something in this world you want to invest in. Help create something in this world that you want to invest in so that this thing will do what I want it to do. Because, like, if players are hell-bent on only worrying about their next piece of gear, then it's hard to get them to invest in anything else. So you have to...
Sure. Yeah, and I'm interested to see how it plays at all.
Like Larp always worked because that was the understanding. And there was enough players to populate it, to make it work. And when the population would dwindle down, you would see that happen, where all of a sudden it was like, the politics didn't work as well when there was 10 people showing up for that week. Like, it didn't function as well. It became very monster of the weekish time until students came back to school and things blossomed back out again. So, I could see that happening with that style of tabletop game as well.
Let's see. There's some chatter back and forth between Sarah, Malice, and Just a Josh talking about generally murder hoboing, but also talking about having a character who chartered an inn and dealing with the ups and downs of that, dealing with downtime. Yasura is saying that you should be careful with Pathfinder 2E's Alchemist because the downtime is tough for them. It takes forever to do things. It doesn't yield very much. We'll see. We'll see how that plays. It's something I'll have to pay a lot of attention to.
Again, those are systems that typically get hand waved. So it depends on how into the minutia Jeff wants to get on all of it. Might determine how much I do or don't do. Because I'm going to get X number of infused reagents for Swift Alchemy a day. So if all I get is my 7, I think 7 reagents worth is what I get right now. So if I can make 7 potions a day, if the minutia gets to the point that ain't worth bothering with, then I'm not going to do it. I'll just book my 7 a day, use them in the 1 or 2 combats we have a session, and call it a day. Like, I won't worry about it. But if I can stockpile relatively sensibly without it becoming a headache or a burden on me as a player, then I probably will stockpile some things here and there. Because my point for the character, I don't want to get too much into specifics of my character, but like, my point is he's a non-combat character. He's literally, the goal is to literally just run around and throw mutagens at my fellow teammates and mutate them and like give them things they need to go do the battles. Like, I'm supposed to just be a watcher and observer. So, that's the goal. So I'm hoping I can stockpile, I guess, is what I'm getting to at the end of the day. So I can make, every day I can start picking things I don't have and stockpiling more of those as well. Get into the poisons and other stuff and like be able to do different things that way. So
it should be pretty interesting. Sarah, some of that does come down to what character goals are and what their backstories are and stuff. Now with our group, it's going to be interesting because I'm curious to see how some players interact with the story structure of this nature, because it's not what we typically do.
Well, what you'll get from me, because I'm a LARPer, and we done LARP together. So you got a good idea when it comes to that sort of stuff, what I'm going to do. And maybe based on my character, you can kind of hone in on what that might look like. You're right. Some of the others that weren't LARPers or don't have a lot of background in that kind of political system, like it'd be interesting to see what they do or don't decide to do with it. And then also when you filter in who their characters are, like,
right.
I don't know if you're going to get it from some of the characters just because of the character. Like, even if the player was down for the idea, like, I'm not sure the character's going to get that level of into it. So.
Well, and I think it depends on how the world impacts them, right? So, like, I think if your world is everything's fine, we're good to go, I've got everything I need, I'm good just sleeping on the ground, and really the only thing I need to do is decide if I want to go kill a dragon tomorrow. Then yeah, it's not going to work at all, right? But if the world is an active, almost threatening kind of vibe, I think where like it's not easy to keep your head afloat just sitting around, then I think it kind of motivates people to give a shit about things. And when the environment is a character that is impacting their lives, then I think they have a vested interest in interacting with and dealing with the environment and finding creative solutions around it.
I think there can, and this gets back a little bit to what you define your characters as far as heroes.
Mm-hmm.
I know in our C2E2 talk, which we did back in February, Levi, our DM, he was the lead speaker on this, and one of the things he said is that characters are typically not your shopkeeper.
Right.
They're not your mundane people. They're not the people who are working mundane lives and doing mundane things. They're like a cut above, and so if you walk into a game with that kind of mindset, characters have to be relatively important.
Mm-hmm.
So like my character Vagabond, he could just resign himself to being a simple fortune teller or an alchemist, set up a shop in a corner of your town so that he cares about the politics going on in the town, because now he's a landowner, a shopkeeper, and he's trying to keep his head above water. And that's a very good avenue to make what you're wanting to do work. And that's what worked for Larp, was vampires had stake in the town. They had turf.
Mm-hmm.
But they were...
Wow. I don't know what that was. I think you're still technically there, but it just strobed out really hard and shuffled our cameras back and forth 1,000 times, and now I'm on your side, and your image is just your logo.
back.
We'll see what happens here. So while he's tinkering around with that, I assume you can still hear me, right?
Yeah, I still hear you fine. Do you hear me?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
So
my camera went away somewhere. I'll try to get it back here.
yeah, so like I think it's interesting in that, yes, I do think that there is some defining that needs to be done as to where yeah, there it goes. Now you're lined up. Good. Yeah, you're essentially lined up.
I'm trying to I'll get myself set up because I can move my chair around. So this is
there you are. Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
So Mouse is asking something here. So moving out of fantasy, look at a game like Shadowrun, where the world is a massive threat, so expending money on where you lay your head at night has significant impact. So there are always output sources for resources. Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think you have to have drains in your economy. You have to have like constant needs that you have to fulfill for players to get invested and give a shit. If food doesn't matter, if drinks don't matter, if where you sleep doesn't matter, if security doesn't matter, then none of it works.
Right. And that's why I'm having such an easy time writing my stories for Zweihander. Because it's baked, just like Shadowrun, it's baked into that world. It's just not a techno, things are expensive, like money-wise, like something is 400,000 of something. Things are 4. You just don't have 4 of anything.
Yeah.
So it's the numbers are small, but it's still the same scale of like you can't afford half the crap in the game. So
yeah, so I guess this kind of gears us back around to an earlier topic though. So when we're looking at these expectations of the world, are your characters something weird in that like they have no permanent homes, they go out and fight things that nobody else would lift their finger towards because that's somebody else's job. They are weird people, right? Like adventurers tend to be weird people. So when you're trying to find what an adventure is, are you like a soldier essentially? It is like a 1% type of individual that goes out and does a thing that nobody else does, or are you a person first that lives in a world who may have the potential to go on an adventure, like your Bilbo Baggins?
Yeah, I think of it in the Starship Troopers thing. Like they very heavily defined who was citizens and who were civilians. And I think of it in the Starship Trooper method of like, do you consider the player characters civilians? or do you consider the player characters citizens in that Starship Troopers sort of aspect, right?
Hmm.
Like there were the people who put things on the line and went and did things, and in their world, in that setting, it was all military based. You were in the
Sure.
military and you served or you
Yeah.
weren't. But if you're going to put it in a fantasy world, there's the people who go out and handle the nasty bad things, and they're adventurers, and that's like their entire profession is to be Joe Schmo adventurer.
Mhm.
And everyone else is the item shop keeper.
Yeah.
Like so on and so forth. And that's a very D&D high fantasy style mindset to take toward itemization, towards
Mhm.
these things. Whereas something like a Zweihander, you don't even have you're not a class, you're a profession. And those professions are very mundane things, a lot of them. So it very much implies that everyone is kind of a civilian.
Right.
And then something happens to your civilians, and you get a cool story out of it when you're done. Like, you're not an adventure even, just a story, like, by the time you're done.
Yeah, a lot of the times I like to kind of view it as at your lower levels, like your 1 to 5 range. That's kind of like the range of like what the average people, not the average person, but like there are those people running around in a fairly large number out and about. And then, like, in my view, like the level 7 to 10 people are like your heads of states and your generals and kind of stuff like that. And then adventurers happen to be in this weird area where they separate themselves from the rest by their actions and by, eventually, developing into a higher level or whatever.
Right. And I think thematically that works very well.
Mhm.
And I think world building wise that works very well. D&D has gone out of its way over the course of 50 years of pretty much implying that most NPCs have 1 hit point and can't swing anything to save their life. And it doesn't matter if they're the Duke, it doesn't matter if they're a magistrate. Those people are horrible statistically, and adventurers are the only people worth a damn who can do anything. Like, a level 1 adventurer is already cut above statistically everybody else. Like, you're already
so that and I think that's, if you go back to the old school where they had like commoner classes and stuff, the level 0 stuff. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. But that's not the vibe I want to go with. And so that's some of why like our early game sessions have been putting you in contact with people that are clearly higher level than you. Is that, other people are higher level than you. Just is just a fact, even though you guys are starting as 3rd level characters. So I kind of wanted to put that out there initially as just kind of like a splash of like, hey, the world is bigger. And that kind of gets me kind of the other topic that we were talking about with challenge rating. And, we've talked about this a little bit in the past when we talked about intrigue. And we talked about it a little bit when we were talking about mapping and kind of more of a simulationist style game. And I kind of am trying to bring some of those vibes into the game, where trying to get away from the idea of every scene is mathematically balanced around your party. So when you move to this one, you know exactly what you're getting. Like you can always assume you can win the fight.
No, I like that.
And some of that, I want scenes where you guys are going to have fun, stomping on bad guys or whatever. Bless you. Because, some players enjoy that. But I also want there to be things out in the world that are just clearly dangerous, or sometimes things that you don't think are dangerous that turn out to be very dangerous. So I want the world to be threatening and varied. And so I'm kind of struggling between just willy-nilly design for flavor and kind of like setting versus keeping you guys from just going splat the first time you go into an encounter.
And this is again a D&D Pathfinder sort of problem that I don't have as Whitehander, and I don't think you have with World of Darkness.
Right.
There's no such thing as challenge ratings in those systems for a reason, because any swing from any peasant can be the end of a life of a noble knight. There are clearly creatures that are meaner and badder out there, and if you encounter one, it is already a bad idea, no matter what quote unquote part of your character's life you're in, to deal with it. So when I'm putting together encounters in Zweihander, the math is just simply number of player characters plus 1. That's how many bad guys I need, and this thing's gonna be, they're gonna have their hands full. It's literally that simple. It's stat arrays and stuff. I random roll all that crap just like I would a character for the most part, unless they're already in the book, and I just take them straight from the book. So that part's easy. So when I pull something like I did like with the Light Eater, it only appeared because of player decisions.
Right.
So when something truly magnificent showed up that they really couldn't head-on combat, it was because of a series of party decisions that led to that. I didn't just put it on the map for the sake of having something big and mean there to run into that they couldn't fight. They made decisions. They made decisions they could do and couldn't do that led them to that point. So then when they had to deal with it, it was big and mean, and they couldn't deal with it the way they wanted to. So to me, that's a little different than coming around the corner of the mountain and finding a cave and finding out it's not a bear, but a manicore that lives in there. You're like, oh crap, it's a manicore. God, okay, that's not what we thought. Let's sneak on out of here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that encounter could be fun if the players have a means of escape, if they play well, right? Whereas the problem I find with some of the monster encounters in D&D in the past is that you come against something that's higher level than you, you're done. Like, you're not going to get the chance to run away. It's like, you're just toast. And so that's some of the balancing act here. Because
you run into an issue where some of the, depending on what kinds of things you're wanting to go with and what level of intellect they have, like talk a dragon, right?
Mm-hmm.
You drop a dragon in there, yeah, you're right, you can't escape it, but depending on what kind of dragon it is, like, it may not want you to escape. It also may not want to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
It may want something else from you. So like, there's a lot of ways you make that encounter different, where it's not a combat encounter, but then you're getting into a lot of storyline minutia stuff that's not really about the challenge itself. And I think what we're talking about now is trying to make sure it's a challenge still.
Right.
Whether you want to do a skill test to quote unquote like sneak past the thing in the cave versus, to get to the item you need to, or whatever the goal is, for that bad example perhaps. But
it's hard with this stuff,
Yeah.
Mouse is saying that something he's had. Something I have had little problem with in Shadowrun is placing content that causes the player to flee instead of murder hobo. In D&D, you can't seem to find people that are into fleeing from a fight, and I think some of that is that the assumption is you can win every fight, right? Like in D&D, it seems like that's the expectation. Like, if I see a thing, I can beat it, potentially. And with these other settings, like Shadowrun or with, World of Darkness or Zweihander, I don't think that expectation's there at all.
No, it's not.
The
systems are known to be deadly systems. So when you're playing with a deadly system, like even the old Star Wars D6 system or World of Darkness is a deadly system, not as deadly as Zweihander, but deadly nonetheless. Like, you when you're getting into those situations that, like, regardless of what you're up against, like, there's a chance this thing might kill your character. And if you're going to play your character, then you can't throw yourself into it. I think that characters are so nigh and vulnerable and hard to kill in systems like Pathfinder and D&D that, like, you get a little foolhardy about it. Like, I know I do in Valorant for sure.
Well, yeah,
so,
fit that I feel
it's hard. Like,
all things considered, even though recent experience has been that I've lost a character, I feel invulnerable in 5th edition, and I don't think that's because of Levi. I think it's just because the system itself makes you feel that way.
No, it is. You're totally right, because your character that didn't make it, he never hit you once.
No,
you never took a point of damage. You died without ever getting hit. Like, it was you died from plot. Plot killed you.
Yeah, and that's the thing that can happen, but. If it was a fight with the caster, short of like a save or die effect, but even then, I think you still get your 3 death saves. Somebody heals you with 1 hit point, you're up. You get back up, they knock you down, you get back up, get back down. It doesn't matter in 5th ed. You can get knocked down 1,000 times in the same fight, and you're fine.
Right.
And the next day you're gonna be at full hit points.
Pathfinder 2e has modified that a little bit.
Yep.
Like, there is a penalty for going down more than once a fight. So there's a few things to consider there with the
Mhm.
wounded stat. So that's kind of a neat play on that. I don't know if it's enough to throw caution into the wind over. Based on my experience with Clashius, I don't know if it's enough to get overly cautious about.
Yeah, our
There's
issue
like-
is the hero points and not applying the wounded effect. So I think that's something we'll have to get rid of to keep that fear there.
To keep the fear there, because I need to play with it more by book
Mhm.
without the stream influence, maybe.
Yeah,
really
'cause-
feel like you're going to see the same thing with Whitehead. Like, you guys are building up enough fate points because of crowd interaction that, like, I'm going to have to start really throwing punches at you to start
Mhm.
drawing on the light some of those fate points so that suddenly the danger becomes real. You know, it was dangerous for Chuck for one game, but then people started using their channel points to buy fate points for people. Some of you are sitting on like 3 of them now, so I got to start eating those back away again.
And yes, Malice, D&D is the Chumbawamba song. That's true.
That's true.
Yes, Eric was saying, well, it comes down to dice rolls too. I mean, you can win or lose any encounter depending on whether or not you whiff or rolls. Yeah and no.
But you get a lot more time in 5th Ed or D&D to make, I'm going to use the word tactical, but you can make tactical adjustments on the
Mhm.
fly a lot more with D&D
Mhm.
because things don't turn so drastically, so sharply.
Right.
You can see the train wreck coming in 5e. Like, oh man, we're on our like 5th round of like shit rolls, no damage, the enemy's hitting us a lot. It's time for a retreat. You know, like, you can make those decisions. Whereas a game like World of Darkness, like, boom, if a werewolf shows up and spins a few rage, you're just down. Like, and so
Yeah.
it's like Blitzkrieg, boom. Swihehand, one bad roll, an injury happens, and boom, you can't even escape now. Like, you're just done. Like, someone else has to save you now. Like,
Right.
you know, like, it's lightning quick how quick it turns on a dime on you, and that's different. 5e will almost never turn on a dime.
Well,
always
it's
impossible.
it's a lot of that's hit points versus health levels.
It is.
You know, and I
it's
think
a-
health
it's a-
levels is a superior
absolutely.
system. But
Yeah, absolutely.
you and I are on the same page on that and have been for
Yes.
a very long time. But
Oh yeah, decades.
but yeah, I do think Pathfinder 2e feels more lethal than 5th Ed for sure. And of course, yeah, I do think we're getting a distorted view of it based on hero points. But I think once I tweak that a little bit, I think we'll be in a good shape of still having that deadliness. I think if you
haven't
ask
written it
Cam,
off
he
yet.
feels knocked down quite a bit. But
I haven't written it off yet. You
Mm-hmm.
know, just from, like I said, a bit of an experience that we had through the module. But that module was also like cranked up to 11. You know, so
yeah, even when
I
I
don't know if that
nerfed
was
it,
the
it felt
best
out of
judge.
control.
Right. it felt unwinnable.
Sometimes, yeah.
So I have a question for you though, just based off of the one homebrew game we've had of yours so far, with the Get Yankee.
hmm
So, like, you put some Get Yankee on the map and you had some hobgoblins on the map.
Yeah.
And they were tangled with each other to a degree, and then we were kind of in the mix. And I think in hindsight, I look at that encounter that you put out there, and I realize, like, we were not intended to fight these things.
Correct.
But I don't feel like there was anything to really let us know that until we fought them.
Yep. Well,
So
yes and no.
I'm curious your design theory on that. For someone who usually likes to balance his encounters,
Mhm.
or to put us on a battle map and then not intend for it to be a battle. Like, I'm curious your design like ideas behind that, because it threw me as not normal Jeff material. So
Right.
I was like, oh crap, like, I realize we need to run, but like, we're literally engaged in combat. Running's kind of hard mechanically once you're in combat because disengage is a thing. So
Yeah, I was toying around with trying to set expectations differently because exactly what you said, this is not normally how Jeff does things, right? Normally, I put a map out there, you know it's balanced, you're going to have a shot, let's go into it and let's do the thing. This time around, I wanted to establish some things about the factions, right? So that the hobgoblins had certain style to them of how they operate. They have a certain amount of courage or whatever, because I'm setting them up to be things you understand later when you encounter them. And in the prior game, just because of timing and not wanting to run a combat, I narrated a scene between you and one. And then I wanted to put a bunch of them on the map and say, yo, There's a bunch here. You guys couldn't tangle with one. Okay, so now you're seeing there's a battle underway between these two groups, and they seem to be evenly matched, even though there's a lot more hobgoblins to the Githyanki. And you guys have one path over here that looks modestly open. If you can sneak past, you guys are in good shape. You got people that are unconscious with you. You got, survivors who are just barely kind of pulling on. I assumed you guys would see that and try to find some skill methods to get around, or spells, or something that would get you away from the scene. But you would see the scene happening.
Well, I think, and I'm not usually one that falls for this, but a battle map is meant for battle.
Yep.
You put a token on a battle map, you put enemies on there, and suddenly my mind kind of triggers a little to like, well, okay, what combat action am I going to take?
Right.
You leave it in a narrated scene where you're describing things going on, and you tell me that we see a path we can duck out of to the right. I'm more likely to take that duck out thing to the right and let you describe what's going on, and maybe through your description you get that point across me. But then once it comes to a full-fledged battle map with X's and O's, it didn't surprise me that people tried to, myself included, try to kind of stand and fight with these things a little bit.
Yep. Some of that was something I guessed would be a thing that could happen. And I'm trying to break habits. Like that assumption of combat map equals combat. I wanted combat map to mean figure it out. What are our objectives here? What do we need to do? What are our actual chances here? And Death Angel, welcome. Good to have you.
Hey, Death Angel.
You catch up a little chat here. Sarah was saying that is an intro module, but I agree you can make it through, but you feel like if you could have gone either way, but isn't that okay? Isn't it okay to lose? Yeah, I do think losing is great. I like there being a risk of losing, for sure. With that starting module, though, it didn't feel like it was... It didn't feel like a contest, between equal participants, right? So it didn't feel like, like a boxing match with weight categories. It felt like the original UFC where you had the scrawny dude fighting the 600-pound kill machine going, yeah, my kung fu can beat anybody. And then, Death Vines came in and just murdered you. And then the problem was, it wasn't that it was listed as hard. The combat encounters were listed as trivial or moderate danger. Like, these were supposed to be like, you just get through no problem.
None of us players knew that.
No.
Like, that's the thing about it. Like, none of us knew that they were supposed to be trivial or hard. We just walked up here. It was like, damn, those things are tough. Like, and then we saw one again. We were like, maybe we don't want to fight these things. Let's sneak past it. Because that's what happens, right? Like, that's what you're going for. At the end of the day, Jeff, that's what you're going for. You're wanting Death Vines. You get Yankee to be like Death Vines, which is fine, but the only way you get Death Vines is that first time you walk in there thinking that they're not going to be a big thing, and you hit them a few times, and you damn near have to kill half the party to make them realize like that's a bad idea.
Yeah, I want there to be... Like, I want you guys to be able to make choices, right? That's a critical thing in gaming. I want you guys to be able to explore, and I want there to be consequences to actions. But I also want you guys to have a chance to learn from an encounter. And so this initial stuff, that was what was going through my head, is I want there to be an opportunity for you to see a lot of factors at play in an environment where you normally would just go pull out the weapons and start jacking something. And in this case, I set it up in a way that you had an archer's back who was clearly maneuvering to get somewhere else. Or not an archer, a skirmisher. He was clearly setting up to flank. So, like, seeing him moving, it was pretty clear that he wasn't paying attention to you, and he was maneuvering to get into the fight from another angle. So, like, in theory, you guys could just wait it around and just walked away. And so I wanted that to be an option, but I also knew that there were tendencies within our group to do what she said. To, as soon as you see a bad guy on the board, I got damage, let's do it. And I figured that the group of you could handle one guy. It would be a very difficult fight, but I figured you guys could pull it off, and I knew that I had more stuff on the board coming that could potentially save your asses if needed. But then your guys' rolls were really not going well, and that crit happened. And when I crit Cam, I went, oh shit. Like, not just crit, but I max damaged on him. And I went, well, I set this up so he wouldn't be one-shottable. But man, that was close.
Yeah. And then he can't get out of combat.
Yeah. Well, but at that point, you do end up with a situation where a party dynamic is important suddenly that wasn't there before. Now Spicy Mike needs you guys to get him out of here. You know?
Well, yeah.
And then so that was also kind of a benefit to that situation. Now, was it perfectly executed? Did I do everything right? No. Did the scene play out exactly how I was intending it to? Definitely not.
It never does, though.
It never will. Right? So, but I do think it created some important things that will set up better encounters in the future, just because I think it changed expectations.
We'll see.
I hope. We'll see. Yeah, exactly.
We'll see. I think there's a possibility for that. I mean, I already was. If he hadn't engaged with one, and I didn't feel obligated to go to try to help create a flank or something to help him out, Vagabond probably would not have engaged with the enemy at all. Like I said, my guy's really not intending to mix it up with the bad guys at all. So most of what I'm going to do is the last half of that battle, I just run around pour potions down people and toss mutagens on them, maybe throw a bomb here and there. My attacks are probably just going to be me throwing bombs here or there, and just running away. So I feel again, kind of like with Bauer, I inadvertently walked right into the kind of character that's needed for this campaign without realizing that's exactly what I did. But so I feel like I'm going to be okay. But I don't know about the rest of the group.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on how, on what players find fun, right? So, I think you, myself, Cam, Tim, I think would look at encounters and say, we don't need an encounter to fight and win, right? That's not the point. It's, I need to achieve X, Y, or Z, and there's a fight potentially between me and that outcome. And if I can get around the fight, that's what I would rather do. But if I get the fight, it's time to get into this fight and get it solved. I think that's something that everyone can get on board with. I'm not positive. I don't know if that's going to be something that's going to be satisfying to Levi and Clint or not, because obviously Levi rarely gets to play, and when he does get to play, he's pretty murder hobo-y. So it's hard to tell with that. Yeah. And with Clint, Clint tends to like to get in a fight, and win it. So he tends not to shy away from a fight. So there may be times where we end up in encounters just because it's something to be fun for players to do. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out.
I think based on who Bergen and Zabra are, that for those two players in particular, I think that we're going to see maybe non-combat encounter resolutions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it as a shying away from an encounter, but I see it as probably non-damage sort of ideas on how to try to end an encounter. So maybe we'll see more of those kind of resolutions versus just straight X's and O's, rock'em sock'em robots until something falls over.
Yeah, I'm hoping that
see that maybe be more the case. I don't know if they'll be quite as political as you want to be about it, but I think they'll definitely be more non-combat oriented.
Well, there's one thing I can be certain of, is that Levi will lockstep with group versus other people. So, no matter what happens, that's going to be a thing. So if I just put a threat pushing in on the group, there's instantly politics in that I will tell you to fuck off. Right? So that's going to happen.
That's for sure.
Clint's character, I think, like you said, is very much in the find alternate ways around fighting. Fighting is probably not going to be his goal or obligations. Clint, the player, though, I don't know. I'm not sure if that will be satisfying to him or not, but we'll see. Now, with some of the chat here, Malice, you're saying that the problem with, especially for seasoned players, is that battle map equals GM put work into this, and they will be annoyed if we don't use it. I feel that as a player. As a DM, I will tell you right now, especially since I have a player sitting here talking with me, this campaign, I will be putting together things that could happen as consequences of your guys' choices. Sometimes there will be encounters I'm designing that I intend to have happen to you. But I never care whether you have that encounter or not. So if you find a way to get around it, awesome. Like, I'm more of like, I want there to be things for you to interact with, things for you to be concerned about or care about or have goals around. But how you get from X, to Z, I don't care, so long as you're entertained by it.
Now, listen, I'm just going to tell you how it is here. We played a 12-hour live game where Levi handcrafted from styrofoam an entire countryside that we never saw.
Yep, that's literally what Air Laser just said.
Jeff is my friend here, but the 2 hours he spent creating a battle map in Roll20 pales in comparison to the hours Levi spent carving and painting and landscape that we never saw. So I can't feel bad about ignoring Jeff's map. I managed to somehow ignore Levi's entire created 3D world for a night. I can ignore Jeff's map, and I'm not going to feel nearly as bad as I did feeling bad for Levi when we didn't actually get to use his peg house.
Yep. Chris Derps, welcome. Yeah,
so
and that's the thing about this campaign.
That's not my concern.
Yeah, the design for this one for me is going to be very different. Like, because we're in a city, there's going to be a lot of recurrent locations, and those locations aren't going to necessarily be fight encounters. Like, I intend for you guys to go places, see a map, just so you have, like, this is where I am, and here's what I'm doing. Like, oh, we're interacting with these people, we're talking about this, we're getting involved in this conspiracy, we're dealing with that crime, we're doing whatever. And sometimes there might be a fight there, and if there is, I'll put some tokens on there, and you guys will have a fight. But like, I'm trying to do it more like I used to do in tabletop days, where it was like, I react more to what is occurring in the scene, and then if it makes sense for something to go down where there's a fight, then it happens.
And that is exactly why I created my battle maps for the way that they're put together. It's already a narrative system for combat, for chase scenes, for those things. It's already very narrative the way the systems are already built. But that allows me on the fly to create a battle that still gives you just enough information that you can think tactically about the battle.
Sure.
And not need the entire X's and O's grid of 2 city blocks laid out in order to function on it. So, and they're not perfect. They don't completely give the whole picture. Sometimes even those mats I put together, like, they rub together where, like, 2 people are engaged in a combat and then another 2 people are engaged in a combat. Well, they're right next to each other on the battle map, so people think they're that close to each other. But I'm like, no, right. Actually, you guys are actually about a medium width from each other still. So when that combat's resolved, you guys move back to medium range from each other again. But
yeah, I mean, you guys are essentially,
I have to explain a little of that, but it's doing essentially still narrative though.
Yeah, we're essentially doing theater of the mind with some guidelines.
With some guidelines, yeah.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing with Roll20. Like, if I was sitting at a table, I would feel a lot more confident, because it's a lot easier to ad lib or improvise encounters and that kind of stuff, which is my preferred style at a table, than it is dealing with digital art and having to come up with maps and loading tokens and putting all this shit in there. Like, that is a pain. I'm still learning it. I'm still trying to figure it out. Malice is saying, he gets, but he's talking about games in general. We all know you're a curmudgeon, Dustin.
It's true.
And then now they're bickering between Malice and Death Shadow about who gets to call themselves curmudgeon.
I'm sorry I can't see chat tonight, guys. I'm lucky to be here as it is. So
yeah, he's hanging out in a hotel on a cell phone, so we're getting what we're getting. But yeah, I think this kind of rolls back into some of our earlier discussion about whether it's encounter designs, whether it's player expectations, or itemization. It all comes down to this idea of balance, and whether that is a thing that belongs or doesn't belong, or if it belongs, to what degree does it belong?
Well, like I said, I'm running a lot as Y-hander right now, and I shared a meme today, and I think I put it in our Discord.
Mhm.
But I definitely posted it on Twitter. And it was when players ask, how I balance my combats, and it was like your survival is mostly an accident. And that's pretty accurate. Like,
Yeah.
if you survive something, like I didn't know you were going to survive it. Like,
Mhm.
in fact, to a degree, because of fate point system in Y-hander, I kind of hope you don't survive it, so that I get rid of one of those every time. Because that's the only way to get rid of a fate point is to push you to the point you didn't survive. So then, if you're going to have those on you, then you're invulnerable forever if I don't push you to that point. So the fact that you survived it is completely by accident.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it's not wrong. That's why I post that. It's hilarious because it's kind of true. Like, I have to push you to that point to get you to use those fate points. So,
Mhm.
Once you're out of them, now I've got to be a little more careful. But until then, I can swing for the fences. Whereas in D&D, that's obviously it's a little different. Pathfinder is probably, because of the way the mechanics work, probably a little touchier, a little harder to balance out, maybe perhaps than what you'd have to be in 5e. I feel like Levi has figured out 5e to a degree. Like, he's figured out about how many extra mobs and about how mean he needs to make them in order to really push us to our limits. Whereas, and that took him a decade to figure that out. Like, over the course of Pathfinder, everything else to get to hone in on just how bad he has to make something to survive for 2 rounds with us. So I don't know. With Pathfinder, it'll be interesting to see how long it takes you to hone in on that as well, if you shoot for that at all.
Yeah, and that's the tricky part. Chris Terps says his party last week raided a fancy club only because the front desk won't let us in, and we decided to go through the vents. The DM had to improv a Deus Ex map. Yeah, been there. Those are the good old days. You just grab a little magic marker, draw a little thing on the battle map. There's where you are. You're done.
And I think that if you're playing online in a Roll20 format, there is a draw method that you can do to make a very crude map. I have seen it done. It's not great, but at least it gives you some markers. If you're good at the free materials that Roll20 provides, you can very quickly throw something onto a map if you need to. The same way that you would very quickly splash something onto a battle map. You can make it happen, and with about the same degree of imagination required to really know what it is. It's true, but I mean, it takes about the same degree of like, oh, that's what you were doing when you drew that on there. Okay, that triangle is a tree. Got it. Cool. So you still have to be able to use that, but otherwise, I think like you just have to know, like, as a player, that like if you're off the grid, literally, you're gonna have to theater the mind a certain amount of it.
Yeah.
Especially in an online format, like, there's encounter, especially like a module, like there's encounters, and then there's like things that there's just not maps for, and you just have to theater the mind. There's just no other way around it, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any problem with theater of the mind, provided players have enough information to make good decisions. And in certain games are easier to theater mind than others, but I think Pathfinder 2 is more friendly to it than Pathfinder 1 was.
Yeah, Pathfinder 1 was not narrative friendly at all.
So
it very much was like, hey, you're staying on the grid and you're going to like it, or you're not. Your character's not going to do half of what you want it to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of information you have to be able to convey effectively, but it's not too bad. And yeah, I think that's right, Death Angel. You should just always keep some generic maps around. Like, that's what I'm getting, is a bunch of just random generic maps that I could just pull up, populate, and go with.
Yeah.
So that's some of the prep I've been doing, is just finding generic stuff and making it look interesting and saying, okay, that's over here or whatever.
Now, just like I did with Terran Treefell, though, I do intend in Zweihander to have some battle maps. Legit, full-scale battle map. But I have to see which plot arcs you guys are going to venture down before I know which ones I got to build. So,
yeah.
And I did the same thing with Terran Treefell. Terran Treefell had the same situation. There was like 3 battle maps, and then there was mostly just narrative ones on my generic battle map that had all the rules on it and stuff. So, but I do intend for there to be at least 1 or 2.
Yeah. Yeah, but like a lot goes into these encounters too. Like when we're talking about encounters and challenge ratings, the numbers themselves tell you what the mechanics are. But a lot of times it's how things are laid out. It can make an encounter harder or not harder. And that's still not factored into those values. And it could be something as simple as like I started you off 10 blocks away instead of 11. You know, like suddenly that somehow changes everything about the encounter. You know,
if everyone's movement's 5, that's 1 extra round before you get there.
Exactly.
So if the mobs aren't moving, you know, like some of those things come very quickly become a matter of just simple math.
Sure. Yeah. If you want to math it out and figure it out. Yeah.
You're just rounds until engagement.
Mm-hmm.
If a mob moves and I move, how many rounds until we're engaged? Because that determines how many rounds you have of range. And there's one thing we know about range. It's that in D&D and probably Pathfinder, if I looked hard enough, range is anywhere on the map that's not cut off by line of sight.
Yeah.
You know, when Morgaine got the longbow, it was like, okay, he can literally shoot anyone on the map as long as there's not something obstructing his view. So, it, you know, like, how many rounds of that do you have to endure to get a mob into engagement?
Right.
So, you know, that again, those are important things that
yeah, those things are less difficult to factor for than some other things. But I mean, it could be things, you know, like, I mean, it's the same kind of a concepts, but like, you know, what's in your environment can really change what happens in a scene. You know, like, is there a railing over this edge of this, you know, yard or something? Is there like a fence? Is there tall grass over there? Is there, you know, a cloud of dust floating out from like where you know, horses ran through and kicked up the dirt? You know, like little factors like that can have these like really big effects on the way a fight goes down that isn't factored into by challenge rating.
I think a lot of the nooks and crannies and the debris and obstacles is the reason why almost all of my games take place in a city. I love city maps more than I like open countryside. Open countryside is boring as hell to me. Yes, I understand in theory. I can make difficult terrain a junk pile or a junkyard, or I can make it a patch of briar. But the junkyard has more character than the patch of briar. Like, it just, you know, there's more I can do with it than the patch of, this is the part where it's rocky gravel and you might slip, so it's difficult terrain, versus this is the market scene where there's, you know, not only people running, but like obstacles all over the ground. Like,
sure, yeah.
Like, to me, just there's more that you can do with it. There's more options for the players to do something with than, you know.
Well, and that's a matter of your battle map
style
creating kind of ideas for players. Like when you put things out there, people look at it and say, "What can I do with that?" And if it's an open field, people look at it and go, "Open grass. I walk on it." You know, like
I can run through it, and maybe not twist an ankle. Right? Yeah.
Death Angel, you're saying encounter level is greater than challenge rating. As a tool, I don't know if I agree, just because encounter level was clunky and difficult to work with. I do think that what it was trying to achieve was probably better in that, you know, your environmental factors, your traps, your hazards and stuff should factor into how, you know, complicated or difficult a thing is. But as a tool, it's what you're trying to create, I would assume as a game designer, is something that is elegant, simple enough that somebody can sit down and spend a couple minutes and come up with an interesting encounter. And that's what CR should be doing for you. It should be saying, okay, here's what you can put together, and it should be fun. Bam, you know.
I think those are tools, in my opinion, that are probably useful to somebody who's community writing.
Oh, for sure, in that case.
If you're putting something out there for DM's Guild, you probably need to follow the CR and the encounter level stuff. But if you're homebrewing stuff for your people at home, you're going to crank that thing to whatever level it needs to be to challenge your own players. And those numbers become very arbitrary very quick. And you know what style of game you run, and you know what style of your players are and what they like to do, and you're going to have that thing honed in. With a new system, it may take you a few levels of figuring it out, you know, the first time you play a new system, but you'll hone in on it, and you'll have it down in no time to figuring out what you need to make the encounters fun for your particular players. Like, But if you're writing something for like DM's Guild, like you're gonna have to kind of use those because everyone else, then it's gonna set their expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, like I said, we talked about Fall of Plaguestone, was that Jeff was reading that this is trivial. What was never trivial to us. Like, it was deadly. So
well, what's wild is some of the fights would say, like, I can't remember what word they used. It was like deadly, or it was like overwhelming, or something like that. It was like, this is bad. And then you guys are just like, yeah, we did fine. And then other fights were like, this is trivial, or moderate, or easy. And you guys just get fucking stomped into the ground. And I'll be like, okay? Like, what happened here?
Yeah, well, and some of that is party composition. Like,
yeah,
we had like three out of 5 characters who literally just ran around and punch things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's not your typical kind of balanced out party. So it's party comp matters a little on that.
I mean, I would say in most groups, like, I mean, if you look at the quintessential 4-man group, right? You have your fighter, your cleric, your rogue, and your wizard. Did I get all of them in there? Wizard, cleric, rogue, fighter. Yeah, those 4. So you have basically 3 melees essentially with 1 range. And then if you toss in a 5th, you probably got like a ranger or like a bard or something shooting from range. But like, you still got 3 out of your 5 are typically up in the face.
Right. Yeah. No, I don't disagree with it. Like with that necessarily. I think it was just the manner and style of the characters and players that we have. That it just didn't, like I said when we played Dungeon Crawl Classics. When I was talking to DM Thaco, if he's still around, and the Liching Hour and DM Chuck, when we were talking about running that, I said, like, they're like, how do you think your group's going to do it? I'm like, they're going to do horrible. Like, why is your group going to do horrible? I'm like, because we have bad dungeon crawl habits. We don't have good dungeon. We're not dungeon crawlers by nature. We're role players, and we don't do a lot of dungeons. Like, I don't suspect they're going to have the proper mentality of like methodically checking everything as they go through. Like, so I was surprised that you guys did as well as you did, because, like I said, we're not dungeon crawlers by trade. Like, that's not what we do. So, and I think Fall of Plaguestone was an example of that, right? Like, we didn't go in there the way dungeon crawlers go into that dungeon. Like, we went in there the way role players go into that dungeon, and it kind of showed a little bit. So.
Well, I mean, to be fair, to use the phrase, if it wasn't for Levi's desire to always just run to the next thing and pull a lever and start the next thing before anyone talked, I think we would have been fine. Because that's really the factor. No, for Dungeon Crawl Classics. Well, also Fall of Plaguestone also, I think.
I was going to say, he was almost worse about it in Fall of Plaguestone than he was in...
God, he was bad about it in that, wasn't he?
Yeah. He took a ballista to the chessboard at one point, I'm pretty sure.
God, well, that and knocked a ceiling down on himself. And triggered a boss fight with a snake.
But proper dungeon crawl groups would not have probably triggered either of those events.
Right.
They would have methodically looked at them, found the traps, and disabled them. So again, like I said, we made some of it harder by some of our own habits than we did because the material was hard. And you just have to know that about your players. If you're out there building designs for your homebrew game, you're going to have a better idea how to do that, or how to take a module and modify it for your habits. Then, like I said, if you're writing for the general public, then you're going to have to maybe more hardline go by what's in the back of the book somewhere as far as what you're supposed to do or what that represents. Now, I've disregarded challenge rating and encounter levels for everything I've ever done. So to me, they're garbage numbers that don't mean anything.
So some of the conversation here in the chat, Death Angel is saying maybe that's the problem. CR is really for the lowest common denominator calculations. I run into that all the time. Every published encounter for their level is cake. Thank you. We are kindred spirits in that. I have said that for a long time, and me and Jeff actually said it before we went on air, and I know what he's going to rebuttal with, and I'm going to rebuttal right back when he's done after I drink this Diet Coke. So go on, Jeff. Okay. What I'm curious about is, I think I know where you're going with this. Like reading what they describe encounters and CR as in the books, like what their design philosophy behind it is that a challenging encounter is one that you will win it, but you will expend a certain percentage of your resources, whether that be hit points or daily abilities or potions or whatever. And so, like, the expectation, I guess, is designed around the concept of how many encounters can you go through in a day and before you're out of resources. Not necessarily, is this fight going to push you to the limit, and are you going to have a challenging time surviving it? Whereas I think for us, we tend to go into combat thinking we want the boss fight hard if we're in a fight. We want it to feel like there's stakes. Every swing could be the last. And because of that, I think if we don't dial it up to critical, hard, deadly, challenge rating +6, it doesn't feel hard.
So here's my rebuttal to that.
Okay.
If there's a creature out there that's challenge rating 4,
Mm-hmm.
and you're 4th level, and you're like, well, the challenge rating 4 is intended to only cost a 4th level party 1/2 of its resources.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's challenge rating 2. It ain't challenge rating 4. It's challenge rating 2. A challenge rating 4 mob, in the numbers that it says should show up, should be a challenge for a 4th level party. Like a legit challenge. Not like a kind of a challenge. Not like a cakewalk where you had to use 2 of your potions and your wizard may have to reread one of his spells during the short rest. Like, that's not what challenge rating 4 should mean if you're level 4. It should be a challenge.
Yeah.
Like a legit challenge. So to me, this is where those numbers are arbitrarily lying to you because nobody thinks of them that way. Nobody thinks of them that way. Everyone looks at challenge rating 6 and goes, this is what 6th level characters are supposed to be encountering.
Well, I guess it depends on how carefully people read the book, right? Like, we don't tend to read the book, so I think that's the case for us, is that we assume that means a thing that it doesn't mean. And we also don't play stylistically the way that the book assumes people play, right? So, like, I think those two factors go into it.
I don't know if I think once upon a time it was more true. And I know, like, again, I kind of know what you're going to say about this too, but, like, I look around D&D tables in a lot of places. They're not dungeon crawls.
Hey, Q-Times is rating us. Hello, with 85 of y'all. So you're catching us having a conversation about challenge ratings, encounter design, itemization, these sorts of factors that kind of swirl around the concept of balance in a game system. Right now, I'm the only one who could see chat because my co-host Dustin over there is streaming in from a cell phone, and so I'm trying to read you guys' chat, let him know what's going on, and then going from there. And we're dealing with some internet stuff, so a little choppier than typical for us. But welcome, we're glad to have you. And right now we're talking about the concept of challenge ratings, and Dustin is telling me about how he doesn't like the idea of it. Like, say something saying challenge rating 4, and it only effectively hampering half of your resources as a level 4 party, as opposed to being a real threat. So we're talking about that. We're talking about whether encounters should be balanced around, what a group can take, or should it be more of just what's in the world and you deal with it or you don't deal with it. Stuff like that. And we're also talking about how magic items have kind of a weird kind of vibe to them, where they're super common, but then they don't really feel magical. But then the really cool stuff seems completely unstructured and uncreated by living entities in the world. So like there's kind of weird disconnects between mechanics and story and game design philosophies. We're just kind of dancing around that scene where we kind of live in that territory. So if you got opinions, let us know.
Yeah. So what I was saying is, like, I feel like most people I see playing D&D out there, and really tabletop role-playing games in general, with the exception of when I come across the groups playing like Dungeon Crawl Classics, most of them are hanging out in the dungeon for the longer haul because it is a very challenge-based game.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from that one, when I see 5e games, and maybe it's just looking through the focus lens of a Twitch.
I think that plays a big part. Yeah,
it probably does. But I feel like with Critical Role and with these games out there, like, they're driving the narrative of what this hobby is. And that's why you're seeing this huge influx of 5e players, because they're not coming in under second edition or Dungeon Crawl Classics rules or anything like that. Like, they're coming in under this wave of Critical Role fans and such. That's what they're replicating. They're not playing this style where a challenge rating 4 is one of 4 encounters that you're going to combat your way through today. Like, everything's a more narrative storyteller focused style. If that's the case, then challenge rating goes out the window, because you're going to have maybe one encounter during the day. And unless you want your one encounter every time you play a session to just be a cakewalk, like I mean, the only other way to do it is just to declare that days haven't passed between sessions.
Yeah, that is a way to do it.
And slow your story down to a crawl to the point that people lose focus of what the story is because they have to they're so busy micromanaging their other systems that they lose track of the story. Like, I don't see why you build your encounters based around something that no one's really doing. Like I said, Tomb of Annihilation is really the only module I think I've seen where I feel like it's a true dungeon crawl. And that's only after you do this first segment of like jungle adventure hex clearing to get to it. So eventually it gets there.
Yeah, I think that there are some biases built into what we're dealing with. I think a big part of it is what you said. I think when you're looking at Twitch, with the exception of Dungeon Crawl Classic style, where it's more of a tournament, seeing if people make it.
Right.
People are looking for story. They're looking for role playing. They're looking for, embodying a persona and that kind of stuff. They're not looking for dungeon crawl and X's and O's fighting. So you're going to be biased towards seeing only those channels existing with viewers, right? Like, there may be a few here and there that aren't that, but I think generally speaking, most people are going to be looking for that kind of description that you're talking about. And then I think you take in the factor that our group certainly focuses more on story and character and more of that narrative style.
I guess I used to think
I don't think that's normal.
The odd ones out. I used to think we were the odd ones out. I don't think we are anymore. I think there's been a dynamic shift, and I think you can still find tables where the dungeon crawls where it's at. Like, I still think there are probably games out there where that's true.
I think there are a lot of tables like that. They're just not tables we're interacting with.
Like, I don't see them at my game shop. I don't see them online. I don't see people talking about them. Like, I don't want to label this as like an age thing, but like, it may just be the grognards out there doing it. Like, I don't know anyone else who is. I don't know. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to maybe. We have a few guests coming up that are more old school, and it'll be interesting to find out if they're still even running those style of games. Because, like, even the most old edition players I've personally have played with in their games, who were still playing first edition rules, they weren't dungeon crawling either. They were hex clear. Their games were hex clears. So you can still have multiple encounters in a hex clear, kind of the way you can a dungeon.
Sure.
But it wasn't structured even that. Those even weren't structured that way.
Well, I mean, I think every table is going to be different because they're made up of different people. I want to address some of this chat here real quick. So Chandra is saying, having played AD&D in every version since, they're grateful for 5e. It's amazing and streamlines a lot of the crunchiness of previous versions. I mean, I think that's something we've talked about a lot. If you go back in our long list of episodes, this is like episode like 77 at this point, you will discover that I am not particularly fond of 5e because I do like a little bit of crunchiness. But there are some advantages to that, and I do think it's great for the hobby. I think it brings in a lot of people who are turned off by crunchiness, and that's really good. I don't think that the Pathfinder 2e is all that complicated. By comparison, it is slightly more complicated in the 5e, but I don't think it's like Death Angel is saying that they watched a review about it and it sounded complicated to them. I don't think it really is. It's definitely not as complicated as Pathfinder 1. It's not as crunchy.
It's a nice
simpler
blend so far, but they're a whole like one book in. Give them some time.
Actually, Death Angel, you're saying
it wasn't that bad when it started either.
Well,
it was just
fair.
Bloated over time.
Death Angel's saying, haha, Grognards, I follow a show called OK Grognard Show. I think we're actually going to be talking to somebody from there. So it's funny you bring that up.
People we're talking to about coming on the show in a couple of weeks. So we'll have them on here. Yeah.
See, Chandra, you're saying they realize there's more to D&D than kick the door, kill a monster, repeat. I think that is... It's hard for me to understand because I think it is a natural evolution and a maturing for players. Like, for us, it felt like that happened. You know, like we started off as kids, power fantasy, getting the cool items, killing the monster, kicking the door. Didn't really have personalities, didn't really have voices, didn't have any stories to our characters. It was just, can we get through the dungeon? And then somewhere along the lines, we matured as individuals, and I think our games matured as a result. I like to say that that's true for everyone. Like, my assumption is other people are like myself to some degree, and they follow kind of similar trajectories, but I'm not sure that that's true.
I think two things happen. One, like, even our old games weren't dungeon crawls. We had encounters, but they weren't dungeons. Not the way that you think of a dungeon crawl happening. Like, a dungeon crawl, for the most part, is not ran well with the newer players. Like, they don't really often get into that level of nuance. Like, I was watching, the crazy thing happened the other night, Jeff. I go downstairs to my basement, and there's my 15-year-old son, and he looks at me with this initial look of terror in his face when I walk down there, and so I know he's in trouble. And he looks at me and goes, "Dad, don't be mad." I said, "What, Chase?" And he goes, "I got one of your dice out of your bag." Like, "Why?" He goes, "I need a D20. "Why?" He's sitting there with his phone, just like I am now. "Ian got a D&D module he wanted to run me through."
Nice.
"Oh, well, okay. Just put it back when you're done." Did he? No. But even they weren't running for his first little run through of a game session stuff. It wasn't a dungeon crawl either. Like, so, you know, like,
yeah,
so
but he's biased a bit because he's seen our stuff. He's got you as an example. Right. And I think you are right that our media right now is pushing a particular style into the fore that wasn't necessarily obvious to us when we were younger.
And I think what happens is I think a game that embraces that, like Dungeon Crawl Classics, really embraces that style. And you can see the people who want to take a break from storytelling and just do something challenging will seek that out.
Yeah.
Or they seek it out for those reasons. Like, it becomes a war game. And then the dungeon becomes fun because it's a challenge war game that you do with your group of friends to get through together. Yeah. Right? Like, that's cool and fun, and they're perfectly okay.
Yeah, it's like playing Warhammer Fantasy, you know, just having a good time out the table.
D&D isn't even the best system for that either.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like if D&D was supposed to be a dungeon grind game, it's not even the best dungeon grind game there is. Like, there's games that are better at dungeon grinding than Dungeons and Dragons is, so go use those instead and let 5e be what 5e is really good at, and that's a good narrative, fast-paced, high fantasy game. Like,
yeah, so, I mean, you can play, like Chris Sturps is saying, they're playing in a Tomb of Annihilation campaign, and they still get a lot of storytelling RP opportunities, just got to bounce off each other. Yeah, you can RP anything. We RP through Dungeon Crawl's Classics tournament.
Sure.
So, like, if you want to inject role-playing in and have silly backgrounds and voices and everything else, you can do that in any system whatsoever. The system has no impact on your ability to roleplay.
And even if you're going to do dungeon crawling with 5e, you have to take the short rest. The short rest, you can wave hand the short rest and say, "Okay, spend your hit dice, we're moving to the next room." Or you could take that moment and you could role play out that short rest.
Right, yeah.
It's an hour. You don't have to spend a whole hour doing it. You can say, "Okay, for the next hour, we're going to spend, 10 minutes for the next hour. And this is just going to be a small little role play session that represents your short rest for the next 10 minutes. Talk about what just happened."
Yeah, it all depends on what your group is entertained by, what the expectations are. So, like, I mean, that kind of ventures us back towards the other conversation of challenge ratings is, what are the expectations here? Are you doing a fight because it has some narrative value? Are you doing a fight because it is entertainment? Is there some blending of the two? Like, what is the purpose of the encounter? And I think that kind of dials in what the answer is on whether you should worry about challenge rating or not. So, like, if it's a narrative thing, I don't think challenge rating is critical. I think it's important in that if you don't intend to accidentally kill your players, you need to pay a little attention to it.
Right.
But beyond that, I don't think it's critical. But if you are making an encounter for somebody because the whole point is to have a fun fight, then I think challenge rating becomes really important. So it's just really trying to figure out what your group's trying to do.
I feel like I know for me, and again, I know I'm, the world has finally caught up with what I've always felt. Apparently, I no longer feel like I'm in the minority like I used to. But all of my combats are narrative. They're all based on the. I don't do random encounters. You don't just fight a random pack of wolves for the hell of it. Like I don't do that. Like simulation's cool. People who love it, and that's cool. Like I have no problem with that. But like it's not how I tell my stories. But I'm also, again, like with my Zweihander campaigns, I run 10 to 15 episode stories. I run mine like short stories, like a Netflix, Daredevil series is how I tell my stories, right? Like it's not lost. I'm not telling my story over 7 seasons of 22 episodes piece. That's like what Levi's doing with Everstorm with 5e, and 5e is built very well for that kind of story format. It's just not the way I tell my stories. So for me, I don't have a lot of time, and I don't want to take up a lot of table time on things that aren't part of the narrative to begin with. So for me, that's an easy decision, and thus, again, I don't have to worry about maybe the challenge rating quite as much because of it.
There's some discussion about modules and being able to adopt random NPCs into parties. Seems like it happens.
Whatever you want to do at your table, you do at your table. Like
it's funny, our group is like allergic to NPCs. We're like, wait, somebody else gonna slow things down? We're gonna have to interact with them. Get them out of here! Get them out!
I hate that our party's that way sometimes.
Sometimes I am too.
No. Oh, it's all right though.
Yeah, I could be both sides of that. Some days I'm really annoyed by it. Some days I'm like, yeah, the NPCs drive me nuts.
Sometimes it depends on what NPC it is.
Oh god, some NPCs, man.
So there's a lot to do with it sometimes. But.
I think a lot of it is just a matter of it's going to end up in combat, and then it's going to make it even slower. And then you're just like, oh my god, I don't want to deal with this. It's already taken too long.
It doesn't have to end in combat.
No, I'm saying adding somebody into your group, so having an additional party member. So if you incorporate the random goblin that you found in the party, and then that person becomes a tag along as a henchman or something, then that gets annoying, right? Don't like that.
He ducks and hides. You don't worry about that.
Hey, Chandra, thanks for stopping by. We're actually about to go off air ourselves because we are in our last 8 minutes of the show, and this is usually where we do our plugs. So before you head out, give us a second here. We'll tell you what we do throughout the week, and we'll plug what we're doing next week. Because somehow time snuck up on us already. So we do this show every Monday night, 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. So you guys coming from over there at Q Times, you probably are watching, I believe, Star Trek, and then coming in here afterwards, which is awesome. So I hope you guys had fun over there. So that's us Monday nights. Next week, I can't remember. Do we have a guest next week? Or is this another us? We're on the fence.
I don't think I booked anyone because next Monday is mine and Tara's 18th anniversary. So we're going out this coming weekend for it. We went out this last weekend. We're going out this coming weekend, so I should be here Monday. So I didn't book a guest, but I do have Matt Jowett coming in a couple
on the 17th.
And D. Daryl Wagner is rescheduling. So, like I said, we got some guests coming up soon. So
yeah, it looks like the 17th is Matt Jowett, 23rd is Joker talking about Mage the Ascension. Yes. And August 30th is Daryl Wagner. He's, if I'm not mistaken, that's the person who wrote the first third-party publisher book for Dungeons & Dragons.
That's correct. He was the first person who did third-party publishing for Dungeons & Dragons. So
that'll be pretty neat. So we'll have that kind of come up in the future. Tuesday, which being tomorrow, if you tune in here, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, you're going to see our... actually, there's a whole handy-dandy thing earlier put in there. Thank you. Bardic Knowledge is our show that Cam puts on. He's making music for games. And so he goes through all the music theory, picks the instruments, shows off how it goes together. And he's been working on some Pathfinder music for me, so it's going to be great. Wednesday is when we're going to be playing Pathfinder 2e. It's my homebrew campaign. So Dustin's one of my players in that. And hey, thanks for the follow there. See if I can actually see the name pop up here. Eventually it'll show up. Wow, I don't even know how to pronounce that. Kyranese. I have no idea. But thank you. Thank you all the same.
Thank you, new follower.
Much appreciated.
Chat, so I can't
so yeah, every other Wednesday night I run Pathfinder 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. And yeah, you're very welcome for the show. And so that's my own homebrew thing. We're doing some interesting stuff. The party is moving into a new city and getting a little bit of culture shock coming their way. So it's going to be fun. Thursday nights, we all get together, we play video games, and a lot of times we use stupid voices or just do dumb projects or whatever. We do a lot of interaction. We've been playing 7 Days to Die a lot recently. Some of the guys are talking about looking at Grounded, which is like basically like a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids kind of game, so we might be checking that out. Fridays, we typically have off. I can't remember, Air Laser, are we playing this Friday? So you can put that in the chat there for me. So every other Friday, I believe, is our Monster of the Week game. Yep. So it is this week. Okay, so Monster of the Week, I am playing the mundane character Dale in a supernatural game, who he has no supernatural abilities except for that bad stuff always happens to him. So he is uncannily attractive to supernatural events, and he is sick of it. So he wanders into problems all the time. He's got a special ability, says, what could possibly go wrong? I'll go check it out. He's got panic buttons, so he knows how to get out of bad situations. And he's got abilities where he gets experience or gives experience to people when he gets in trouble. It's hilarious. So there's that. Saturday, so every other Saturday is Everstorm. This week we are off. Everstorm is our 5th ed campaign that's been going for a very long time. We're like almost 50 episodes in at this point. You can find a lot of our old content, by the way, on our YouTube, which apparently I accidentally got logged out there. So if you go to that link, you're going to see a lot of our past broadcasts, which is great stuff for those of you guys trying to find content these days. So you'll find all of our Wisdom Check stuff. You'll find a bunch of our 5th ed content on there. I'm getting the Pathfinder stuff on there. We got a bunch of the Bardic Knowledge, and we've also got another show on here that our 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons DM puts on called DM to Art, where he makes character art using Photoshop and all that stuff. And earlier just pointing out that we also have a lot of our content up on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and iTunes, if you look up Tabletop to Keyboard. Right. And, God, I feel like I'm missing something. The other stuff you should check out.
No big deal.
Yep, that's the one. That's why I enter on Sunday, every other Sunday.
It is. This coming Sunday, I'll be back in town at my computer. You won't have this weird phone cam thing going on. Mm-hmm. It'll be Horrid Huttenberg, my Zweihander campaign. It's chapter 4. I named it and forgot now what I named it. But it's there.
Perfect.
Don't worry about it. It's going to be awesome. The party's trying to figure out which NPCs they like and don't like, and they may have just accidentally killed one. It's I Dream of Genie. That's right. Chapter 4 is I Dream of Genie.
For no ominous reason whatsoever.
For no ominous reasons whatsoever, they just killed Genie. So there might be some interesting solutions to this conflict they found themselves in. And so, so you have to tune in. That's 5 p.m. on Sunday, 5 p.m. Central Time, for Chapter 4 of Zweihander.
Awesome. Death Angel Shadow wanted me to tell you your phone camera looks good to this old grognard.
It does. It looks better than my actual webcam on my computer.
It's pretty amazing.
It doesn't have all the functionality in my computer, so.
Mm-hmm. So we'll be doing that throughout the week. I hope you guys find some of that's enjoyable. I should probably find as a raid. What you got for me?
I have a few other outro messages while you're looking up a raid here, Jeff. So first and foremost, this last week I got to GM for Gen Con Online. I got to GM Zweihander, and I did the part 1 for Something About Marie, which is an adventure path that comes from the main Gauche supplement book. And it was a fantastic time. I had 6 wonderful players, all of which who spent the first hour just dissecting and chumming an NPC who died on their boat. They didn't kill the NPC. He dies in the story on your boat, and then you have to decide what you're going to do. And they decided that they had to quarter him and chum him into the water for the first hour of the session. So they were very grim, perilous players. They were perfect for the system. They loved it. I killed one of them and maim the other so bad that the character couldn't go on by the end of the session. So a good time was had by all. They enjoyed it thoroughly. 1010 would totally do it again. And just if they happen to be watching for any reason, I just want to thank Daniel D. Fox and Adam Rose and Matt Jowett for giving me the opportunity to not only run and play Zweihander and introduce me to the game, but also give me a chance to be part of the organized play community for Zweihander. So
yeah, it's freaking cool.
Those guys happen to be tuning in for any reason today. Big huge thanks to them. So
yeah, fantastic. I'm glad you got that opportunity. That sounded like a lot of fun. Yeah, and one other thing before we go out of here, there was some talk about the Pathfinder 2 ebook being in a humble bundle right now, and that is true. That's awesome. The other thing you may want to pay attention to, though, is when we hit 200 subscribers on our YouTube channel, we are going to be giving away a copy of the core book. So one of you guys can get lucky.
160.
Yeah, we were about 161 or something
in the last week somewhere because we were about 150. Now we're like 161, so we gained like 11.
Yeah, so if you're new,
a few times and you haven't found us, like go give us a sub on YouTube, and when we hit 200, you can get yourself a fancy Pathfinder 2e core rulebook.
Absolutely. And they go pop on our Discord if you're not part of there. So I did find us something. It looks like Quest and Chaos is doing the grand finale of the Rick and Morty game. So that sounds hilarious. So I think we're going to go bundle up and go over there. So
you all have a good time there. I won't see it.
Yeah, likewise. All right. So we'll see you over there. We'll see you soon. And thank you very much for joining us. Enjoyed having you. And we'll load that bus. So here we go. See you all later. We got 4 seconds on this bus. And good night, all.